Parkour and Assassin's Creed are two words that go hand in hand. However, whilst some games give us the most incredible death-defying experience, other games not so much. So in today's video, I'm going to be ranking all of the 14 mainline Assassin's Creed games parkour from worst to best, and let's just jump straight on in. Now, whilst Odyssey easily has one of the most beautiful maps in the franchise, from a parkour perspective, it's unfortunately one of the weakest. Now, being the sequel to Origins, the two games do share a lot of similar traits, with Odyssey being the largest map of the series so far. Cities and towns are far and few between, and parkour essentially just wasn't thought through at all. Buildings are all too far apart to jump from one to the other, and on top of this, there were also no environments, ledges, poles, or anything for you to really use to aid your movement across, nor did the game include any parkour routes for you to follow either. The other big negative, and a lot of Assassin's Creed games have this trait too, is that you can quite literally climb anything. Now, I mean this in the sense that if there is a steep mountain with no handholds, never fear, because Cassandra or Alexios can simply just climb straight up it. Previous games had elements of searching for the right handholds, forcing you in certain points to think and work out which route you have to take, but in Odyssey, if there's a big mountain in this game, hold the A button and away you go. On top of this, Cassandra or Alexios don't take any fall damage, which if you think about it is quite a big problem. I actually like feeling the risk of death in Assassin's Creed, knowing that if I make a mistake, if I overestimate, I'm going to fall to my doom. I do get the point that neither of them are assassins, they're technically demigods, but it's like, if there's no risk involved, then almost why bother having small structures to climb and tiny moments of parkour? Where is the challenge? This game also tries to stop you just straight off running off edges, which for characters which take no fall damage, feels like a really weird choice. To top it off, there is simply just a lack of momentum. It's a constant barrage of running, climbing, speeding up again, running, climbing, and repeat. There is no sequence or weight with our movements, and Cassandra and Alexios never really get the chance to get moving. One thing I do like, and it's more the reward of the viewpoint rather than the actual climbing itself, is that scaling those massive Greek statues was super satisfying, but overall, parkour in Odyssey is really disappointing, putting this game in last and 14th place. Now, Origins, being the first massive RPG of the franchise, despite its beautiful setting, other than climbing and sliding down the pyramids, which by the way is one of the coolest things you can do in any game, it's largely devoid of any actual parkour opportunities. Whilst it's one of my favourite AC games, from a parkour perspective, Ancient Egypt is, and quite rightly so, lacking in any real parkour opportunities. Yes, we have the pyramids and a few cities and towns and so on, but we are largely in the desert, so of course, structures we can actually climb and parkour across are going to be lacking. There are, however, definitely more parkour paths than Odyssey, however mechanically, in the rare instances you can parkour, it's just very simple. Just like Odyssey, all you have to do is hold A and run, and Bayek will take you where you need to go. The game does, however, include the standard back and side eject mechanic, although it won't really allow you to gain any height as you do back eject, but in the very few parkour paths for you to follow, you don't really get much of a chance to use it, and it's simply just hopping from one building to the next. Origins and Odyssey are the only Assassin's Creed games in which you can't sprint, which is definitely a weird choice movement-wise, not only sacrificing control but also speed, with Bayek, just like in Odyssey, also not being able to run off edges, meaning that the parkour risk factor in Origins is basically zero. And the last negative, and this is a hilarious one, is that when Bayek uses a zipline, he simply just holds on and whizzes down like he is his own personal ski lift. This isn't really a mechanical issue, but it can be pretty funny when Bayek just casually shakes his hands from the pain of sliding down a rope at 50 miles per hour. But it's the final nail in the coffin as to why I'm putting Assassin's Creed Origins Parkour in 13th place. Now, you probably guessed this, but yes, for our next place we have Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Whilst out of the RPG 3, I think it's the strongest from a parkour perspective, that is only by a fraction, and it does follow most of the same traits from its predecessors. Essentially, the problem with Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and the whole divide between Assassin's Creed fans is that when you make a huge RPG game, it's very difficult to properly include two of the three core elements of Assassin's Creed, parkour and stealth, with both sets of those mechanics sacrificed in order to explore such a massive world. So many people always comment on how Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla aren't real Assassin's Creed games, and I can kinda understand that, but from a parkour perspective, they did at least learn a little with Valhalla. Its biggest change compared to Origins and Odyssey was its world, and whilst 9th century England has a lot of open space, it's a little denser than its predecessors, with many scalable cities and towns throughout, actually offering a few small parkour paths too. Eivor personally also feels more grounded and realistic in his movement than his RPG counterparts, with his animations, whilst feeling weighty, seem to me to be more authentic than Bayek and Cassandra. They also added the ability to sprint back into this game too, as well as now taking some fall damage, and whilst it's minor, both those mechanics are something I think should always be included in any AC game. Whilst Eivor can climb up anything, he does also have a new slide mechanic too, just adding an extra bit of flair to his movement, and although he can't side or back eject, if there is a ledge to the side or behind him, he will always grab it. But other than that, there isn't much to talk about. Valhalla's parkour mechanics are nothing special, and like its predecessors, there are so little opportunities to actually use it, making me put this game in 12th place. Now you may be thinking, what? This game isn't due out to be for another month, so how can you rank the parkour? Well, I was lucky enough to get 4 hours hands-on experience with this game, and I'm pretty clear where I stand with it in terms of the parkour. I also imagine if there were a bunch of parkour opportunities that the game had to showcase, they would have done it as it could only be a positive, so I'm almost 99% sure that what I could do as Naui a couple weeks ago will remain the same come the release on the 20th of March. So with that being said, I'm not going to focus on our heavy samurai protagonist Yasuke, I'm going to focus on Naui's parkour abilities, as essentially Yasuke just doesn't have any. Now, Shadow's parkour is better than Valhalla, Odyssey, Origins for 3 reasons. Firstly, we have Naui's flips. While some people think this is a bit overkill, and granted it kind of is, for the most part, whilst it doesn't really add anything into the game mechanically, it does look awesome. Not only can Naui flip off almost every single ledge, she can also manually flip whilst running, which is the first time they've really added this into an AC game, making her feel like a proper ninja. Her parkour speed too is much faster than the RPG 3, allowing Naui to scale structures and leap between buildings at much greater speed, just aiding to the concept of her being a light and agile shinobi. And lastly, her grappling hook, which granted again isn't exactly parkour, not only allows her to scale almost everything, but at times also allows her to do these really cool swings, be that from roof to roof or into various dives. But despite these small improvements, the big issue with Shadow's parkour, and the same issue with the 3 games I've just mentioned, is that the world simply just isn't built for it. Japan, whilst granted is absolutely beautiful, offers next to no parkour paths, very few ledges or buildings for Naui to even create her own routes. It's largely just the standard jumping from roof to roof over and over again. This isn't me bashing Shadows in any way, by the way. I'm genuinely really excited for it and had an absolute blast when I played it, but in such a massive RPG game, the parkour mechanics, or lack of them, is kind of what I expected. It's funny really, everyone always bashes about realism in these games, and if you think about it, how likely would 16th century Japan have all these poles and ledges etc. for you to do all these parkour spectacles across? Probably not. Either way, Shadows, you are number 11 on this list. But before we find out which game's parkour is next on this list, a very short word from today's sponsor, Factor 75. Now like me, you may find that life is busy. On top of working full-time, running a YouTube channel and having a 6-month-old baby, eating great healthy and fresh food often gets forgotten about. That's why I'm super pleased to be sharing about Factor 75, allowing me to eat chef-prepared meals in just 2 minutes, so not only can I eat delicious food, I can get back to what's important and actually spend more time playing Assassin's Creed and making more content. Oh, and of course hanging out with my family too. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. You can choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus or Vegan and Veggie. And there are more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good throughout the day. To get 50% off and free shipping on your first Factor box using my link, click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. Supporting Factor 75 means I can genuinely keep creating more Assassin's Creed content, so a big thanks from me to all of you out there. Back to the video. You probably know by now, but Mirage was originally planned as an expansion for Valhalla, meaning that they basically started production by copying all of the assets from that. So whilst Basim might seem like he should be light, fast and agile, his movement speed and parkour mechanics are much more like Eivor's. However, they did add some new features. Basim can now roll over certain objects, slide down others, jump off beams that connect buildings and more. Even with the limits of Valhalla, I think the parkour in Mirage is the best we've seen in years, mainly because the world works so well for it. Baghdad has a mix of low and tall buildings, ropes, zip lines and lots of parkour paths, giving you plenty of chances to free run around. If you want, you'll find that you could almost spend the entire game without touching the ground, and like the rest of the game, for the most part, it's all well made and smooth with some cool animations. That isn't to say it's perfect though, you'll still get stuck in some spots, Basim doesn't always go where you want, and climbing down is probably the weakest aspect of the parkour, as it's really slow and can often look pretty clunky. But since its release, the game has been updated often, making the animation smoother, improving side and back ejects, and even making Basim a little faster to top it all off. Mirage's parkour system isn't the most complicated. In fact, it's pretty simple, with most of the time you're able to just hold down A and run, and it may not have the same crazy stunts or smoothness as other AC games, but it's definitely better than the other 3 games that came before it, and a big step towards bringing back that classic AC feel, thus sticking this game in 10th place. And now we come to a game I played and reviewed very recently, and one of the most controversial games in the franchise, Assassin's Creed Rogue. Now, the entire Kenway saga, consisting of AC3, Black Flag and Rogue, all used the same Anvil engine, and when AC3 released, it got a bit of a bad rap because of the supposed downgrade from the Ezio trilogy, and that is a fair comment. Previously, you had more choice with your movements, and it was far more difficult to master, and in AC3 they removed some of the trickier aspects, making parkour more accessible for the average gamer. This followed suit into Black Flag and Rogue, and it's very difficult to not especially compare those two games, as Rogue almost shares all of its assets with Black Flag, but it did add some small changes too. Rogue includes a huge amount of parkour paths for you to follow, allowing Shay to actually build momentum as he hops, skips and jumps between different ledges. Shay can swing round corners, be pulled up by ropes, has the continued mechanics of side and back ejecting, as well as cancelling and vaulting, ultimately adding more variation to the path that you want to take. There are a couple tiny additions compared to Black Flag 2, the first being a quick climbing animation that happens in certain small towers or large tree trunks, which looks great, as well as some roofs having a sort of scaffolding rope between them, allowing Shay to swing between buildings. The best part of the free running, and this goes to the entirety of the Kenway saga, is the tree parkour, allowing, whilst largely following the paths before you, to glide effortlessly through the trees, giving you an immense amount of satisfaction. What I also love, and although it's just an animation, are the small moments you get to run through buildings, always especially enjoyable if you're actually chasing someone. Spoiler alert, Black Flag is next on this list, and you could argue that from a location perspective, and this can make or break the parkour in Assassin's Creed, Rogue might actually be better suited for it. The game's major city of New York, having been copied and pasted over from AC3, is a joy to run around, offering almost non-stop opportunities for Shay to cut loose in. I would say though, and it's difficult to tell, that the parkour in Rogue to me is a little buggier than its predecessor Black Flag. Shay would occasionally glitch out or get stuck, particularly when trying to tree parkour or running across his ship. Whether it's just my imagination and Black Flag had similar issues, or it's because Rogue and Unity were developed simultaneously, resulting in neither getting the polishes they needed, I can't say for sure. They also made it in Black Flag and Rogue that you could only parkour when in sprint mode, meaning you couldn't casually parkour across different paths, you always had to go at them full pelt, just removing some of your control. However, despite all that, the parkour in AC Rogue is still pretty good, popping it nicely in 9th place. I do have to give a special shout out to the Earthquake of Lisbon and that parkour sequence. I recently just replayed and reviewed Rogue, which I'll leave a link to in the description, but that whole scene was incredible. Now this is going to be a short one as, like I said, Rogue and Black Flag are basically exactly the same, minus the location and the few tiny additions in Rogue. The three cities of Havana, Nassau and Kingston are all solid parkour havens, with the outskirts also offering some terrific tree parkour as well, but like I said, Rogue probably takes the lead in location. But I think the main reason which just takes Black Flag past Rogue is that in general the whole game, and parkour, simply feels more polished. Rogue after all was made in a year and developed by Ubisoft's smallest studio, Ubisoft Sofia, which has only ever made side games in the form of Liberation and Rogue. It was also developed alongside AC Unity, whereas Black Flag took 2 years of development and was made by Ubisoft Montreal, their largest and most accomplished studio. Black Flag also featured some really fantastic parkour chases too, just giving you lots of opportunities to really enjoy and make the most of it. And yeah, that's kind of it. There really isn't much more to say as we've covered it all in Rogue, but overall Black Flag is a super fun, simple but enjoyable and smooth parkour experience, deserving, I think, its spot in 8th place. And by the way guys, if you are enjoying this video, then a like and hitting that subscribe button would go a long way. I would love to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help to do that. Now we've obviously just spoken about Black Flag and Rogue, two games whose parkour is very similar to AC3, being made on the same engine, but AC3 was the one that came first and in my opinion did it best. On the positive side, parkour now allows us to climb trees, scale cliffs and swing through branches, which truly feels incredible. While it's mostly a network of linear paths, meaning you don't have much freedom in direction, personally that doesn't bother me in the slightest. The animations themselves look fantastic, whether it's jumping between ledges, vaulting over fences, squeezing through cracks, or even just dashing through houses. This was the first time house running was introduced to Assassin's Creed, and even though it's just a simple animation, it feels amazing. Honestly, this game deserves praise for just how fluid and seamless the parkour and free running looks. One somewhat controversial change was the adjustment to the controls, now combining free running and jumping into a single button. Many people felt this was a downgrade from the previous 4 games, and whilst I can appreciate that we do have less control, for the average player, making parkour simpler to master was a huge positive, but for those hardcore lovers of the Ezio trilogy, this felt like a big kick in the teeth. One great feature that remains is the ability to jump directly onto your horse, something Black Flag, Rogue and even the latest AC titles lack. The game also retains parkour moves like hanging, back ejects and side ejects, and from a parkour standpoint, AC3's world is impressive, whether you're tree running in the frontier or leaping across the rooftops in New York, but it doesn't provide as many parkour opportunities as the first 4 games, though it certainly offers more than Black Flag and Rogue. A special mention goes to the Captain Kidd missions, which offer some excellent parkour challenges and fun free running puzzles. I'd recommend actually tackling these early in the game, as they'll help improve your parkour skills for the main story. However, at times, AC3's parkour can feel a little unresponsive. Connor and Haytham may climb when you don't intend them to, and also, whilst it's not exactly parkour related, I have to point out that normal walking animations do look quite odd, almost as if father and son have one leg longer than the other, causing them to walk at a strange angle. Overall, parkour in AC3 is incredibly enjoyable, simple to learn but with less depth than previous games, but definitely looks and feels fantastic, putting this game in 7th place. Now you're probably wondering if Unity is coming up right after Syndicate as they share the same game engine, and surprisingly it isn't, and I'll explain why. While Syndicate's parkour system is largely copied from Unity, meaning the animations look fantastic and at times you feel like a parkour master, unfortunately London's design just doesn't really work for a really great parkour experience. The city's wide streets and open spaces often leave Jacob and Evie running at street level or hijacking a carriage from some unsuspecting driver, rather than gracefully traversing Victorian rooftops. Within this is a severe lack of dedicated parkour routes, completely limiting the opportunities for free running. This is likely why Syndicate introduced the grappling hook, which is a steampunk style rope gun that can latch itself onto almost anything. Whilst it's a fun and somewhat divisive addition that I do enjoy, it quickly becomes repetitive and ultimately undermines the need for parkour. Why bother carefully hopping from ledge to ledge when you can zip across a rope in half the time? If there were more chances to make use of the game's parkour mechanics, it wouldn't be as much of an issue, but in practice, the grappling hook ends up replacing it almost entirely. Adding to the frustration, Jacob and Evie, much like characters in the RPG trilogy, awkwardly stop when approaching a ledge, as the game prevents them from stepping off anything too high, just completely breaking the immersion. The removal of a manual jump further reduces our control, and when you combine this with the grappling hook, which eliminates the need to climb altogether, the result is an odd and somewhat unsatisfying parkour experience. There were a few good additions to the mechanics though. Alongside the standard back and side ejects, Syndicate does add a cool side dismount animation, which looks great, as well as being able to tap the A button when hitting the ground, taking less damage when jumping from great heights. It's an awkward one, Syndicate. The parkour at times can really be enjoyable and smooth, but the map just truly isn't designed for it, so therefore you don't get many opportunities to use it. Parkour and the world have to go hand in hand, and with Syndicate that just isn't the case, making me put this game in 6th place. Despite this being the oldest game in the franchise, Parkour was something it got absolutely right. Sure, animation wise it can look pretty ugly, but it is now nearing 20 years old, so we do have to take that into consideration. The world as a start is made for parkour. In fact, you'd probably go as far to say that they designed the world around this game's parkour and not the other way around. You can almost envisage almost 2 decades ago everyone working in Ubisoft behind the scenes, with parkour being a central focus of the game's development. The 3 cities of Jerusalem, Acre and Damascus are all filled with non-stop free-running opportunities, with so many different beams and ledges and well thought through buildings allowing for almost unstoppable free-running opportunities. I think the biggest benefit of AC1's parkour was the freedom it gave. Every action you take is down to your own control, rather than being handheld by AI or animations. We can side and back eject, manually jump, hang from beams, slide across obstacles and jump from any ledge, even being able to fall at will and then catch your handhold when you choose. All of this combined makes the parkour at times feel utterly amazing. Granted, it isn't all perfect. The climbing, whilst challenging in a fun way, can be pretty slow, and the controls can be difficult to master and often clunky at times too. Sure, Altair isn't as fast or fluid as his future counterparts, but you have to admit it's kinda mad that the original game's parkour isn't the worst, as in, sequels to this game still aren't matching up to the original parkour mechanics. Whilst it's not the greatest in the series, for the time this is absolutely incredible, and AC1 probably gives us the most realistic parkour in the entire series, leading me to put this game in 5th place. Now on to AC2, and whilst the Ezio trilogy's parkour in general feels pretty similar, and these 3 sections are going to be a little shorter than previous ones, improvements were definitely made with each sequel. In terms of improving on AC1, the 2 biggest changes AC2 made were Ezio's speed, making him that extra bit quicker and definitely more fluid in his movements, as well as the new mechanic of the larger grab jump, allowing you to climb faster by jumping and grabbing ledges. The largest change of course was with our world, and Florence, Venice and beyond are utter parkour playgrounds, with even more environmental parkour ledges, beams etc. than we had with Altair. They introduced the mechanic of being able to swing round corners, an aspect that would be carried over in many games onwards, and we're also much higher up now than we were in AC1 as well, just adding that sense of danger and care with your parkour as you try not to fall to your death. Now the only thing they did remove from AC1 was the sliding vault feature, but I found with all of the other mechanics and additions to the world, it's not something I miss too much, leading me to put AC2 in 4th place. My first instinct with Brotherhood's parkour is that Rome is built for it, and Ezio feels even more responsive than he did in AC2. In fact, the biggest change since AC2 is the speed at which Ezio climbs walls and performs his back and side ejects, just fine-tuning the already great parkour experience even further. Whilst the outskirts of Rome don't offer much opportunity, the city centre provides almost non-stop rooftop running, in my opinion, just that tiny bit stronger than our previous cities of Florence and Venice, offering a solid number of parkour paths to follow. Climbing, especially up large structures, remains a challenge and a bit of a puzzle, requiring you to search for ledges and grab points. A special mention goes to the parkour in the Romulus-led side missions, forcing you to use back and side ejects and feeling like there is some risk involved, which for me is one of the game's highlights. They also introduced rope lines in Brotherhood as well, now able to pull us up to the roofs quickly, which we've seen in every game since. We also now have the ability to be able to jump to and from our horse, making for some excellent parkour fluidity, but ultimately just making us feel awesome. Overall, Brotherhood makes minor but meaningful improvements to AC2's already enjoyable parkour, with Ezio being responsive and fast, with Rome providing some fantastic parkour moments, whether on a planned path or one that you create yourself. It remains one of the best parkour experiences in the franchise, earning this game a solid third place in my ranking. Assassin's Creed Revelations is easily one of, if not the best, parkour systems in the series. It builds on what came before, making movement smoother, faster, and the biggest factor, just more fun. A big part of this is the new addition of the hook blade, essentially making our climbing easier, allowing Ezio to grab ledges from further away, and adding more momentum to our movement, making our jumps now way more effective. If I was to make a video about mechanics that need to be in every Assassin's Creed game, the hook blade would definitely be one of them. And then we have our city of Constantinople, which is perfect for parkour. It's big, dense, packed with buildings of different heights, and it forces you to think about the route you should take. Revelations was the first game to introduce ziplining, but it also perfected them too, allowing you to get across rooftops faster, but even catch these ziplines in mid-air. There are also tons of them as well, making it a really integral feature and not just a novelty like we have in other AC games. Other than the hook blade and ziplines, our other mechanics haven't changed, but even though Ezio is now in his 50s, he's still just as agile and controllable as before, so even without these new mechanics, you're in for a really fun time. They've also nailed parkour challenges in this game too, continuing with the AC2 and Brotherhood tomb challenges, pushing you to the limit and again really highlighting just how fun movement in the game can be. Whether that's carefully executing side and back ejects, doing massive jumps over chasms or ziplining across huge open spaces, these feel so well put together and the perfect opportunity for you to really enjoy the game's parkour. Overall, Assassin's Creed Revelations absolutely nails parkour. It took what worked well before in AC2 and Brotherhood and took it that one step further, adding some fabulous new mechanics and possibly the best city in terms of free running for you to enjoy it in, making me put this game in second place. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, of course it's Unity. Unity has the best parkour system, and I'm also sure many of you believe the Ezio trilogy is the best. And to be honest, you're both right. Unity is without a doubt the most fun parkour experience in any AC game, with Arno moving in the smoothest, most impressive way we've ever seen from an assassin. The game introduces brand new parkour animations that make movement feel incredibly lightweight, almost ethereal at times, gliding across rooftops with flair and style. One of Unity's biggest strengths is its downward parkour system, which lets you climb up and down from great heights with ease. In older AC games, getting down from high places always felt a little awkward, but here they fixed that problem really well. The city is packed with tons of parkour routes, seamlessly guiding you from one smooth transition to the next. But if you prefer to make your own path, that's entirely possible too. It's rare that you'll ever need to stop and just run to your destination. Paris, in my opinion, is one of the best designed cities in the series for parkour. The density and layout of the buildings make traversal incredibly fluid, with an upgraded window entry system that lets you fly through buildings rather than just over them. This makes the city feel like a real living space rather than just boxes that you're forced to run over. That being said, despite all its greatness, Unity's system isn't as solid as the Ezio trilogy. Arno doesn't always go exactly where you want him to, sometimes he gets stuck on small objects or just ignores your input altogether. He can also look a little weird and floaty, like gravity doesn't fully apply, and at times he feels a bit clunky to control. The game also follows the trend of continuing with the simplified parkour, with the standard side and back eject mechanics. It relies heavily on its animations, which whilst look amazing, adds to why it doesn't always work perfectly. Still, for me, it's not about how complex it is, it's about how it feels. And when it comes to parkour in Assassin's Creed, nothing feels better than Unity, leading me to put it in first place. In the end, your preference will depend on what kind of AC player you are. If you like full control, the Ezio trilogy without a doubt is the best. But if you want to feel like a parkour god, then I think Unity is the way to go. Of course, opinions are like arseholes, everyone has one, so do be sure to share yours in the comments. And if you want to get really mad about a ranking video, check out my ranking of every AC game, hopefully on screen now and in the description below. And hey, if you like this video, please do like and subscribe for more, and hopefully I will catch you legends in the next one. Until then.